recording, and we're good. Okay.
We're good?
Yep.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the new episode of Paranormal Encyclopedia. We're sorry we had to miss last week. For those of you who aren't in New Jersey, we got hit by one heck of a snowstorm. That was what happened.
Yeah. The gods trying to prevent my interview once again.
Brian is clearly cursed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's no other way around it. So
Every time he's tried to interview me, something horrible goes wrong and stops it from happening.
as hopefully you can see on your screens, we actually have a guest in studio for us today.
Yeah.
You're only the second person we've actually had come in.
I live close enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brian snagged me at a book signing.
Yep.
Yeah, Brian's already taken the kidnapping guests for us. I'm not sure this is a good sign.
Pretty much. Well, you got to do what you got to do.
So to go through introductions, we get slightly on track. I'm of course your host Kevin Mears, demonologist, paranormal investigator.
Brian McKinley, author, sometimes known as the godfather of vampire thrillers.
Amisha Campbell, sidekick.
And
Our new victim.
I'm K. Edwin Fritz. My name is Keith, and I'm an author and a middle school English teacher.
Be afraid.
Be
I was
very
gonna say,
afraid.
middle school English teacher. Now that sounds really scary.
Yeah,
It
that's
can be. It really can be.
Particularly, you got that awkward age where they're just starting to enter teenhood, and they're still like trying to figure out their place.
The most amazing thing about teaching 12 and 13-year-olds is that they are just starting to figure out that they do know some things, and they therefore think that they know just about everything.
yes. It's
Oh,
the
yeah.
most dangerous.
But they
age.
haven't developed that attitude yet. That comes in, actually, that comes in 8th grade.
Yeah.
So I teach 7th grade. So I have like a good solid, like 6,
Year
7
before you,
months.
so you don't have to deal with
Yeah.
it.
Well, when they come back from
Yeah.
spring break, they're monsters. They're just,
Or if you get the kid that was held back a year, then
yeah.
Well, a friend of mine had her father was an engineer,
Mhm.
so he liked to be creative with punishment. Had possibly the best answer for know-it-alls I've ever heard. One day, when she was being a real pain in the neck and know-it-all, handed her a piece of paper and a pencil and said, "Write down everything you know."
Oh,
So her humility pretty quick.
I used to run detention many, many years ago, and I was told by the principal at the time that I had the most effective detention they ever saw. I had a list of rules on the board, and the number one rule said, the only thing you're allowed to read are these rules, and then it was things they were not allowed to do. So you're not allowed to do homework, you're not allowed to take a nap, you're not allowed to look at the clock, you're not allowed to count ceiling tiles, but you can read these rules as much as you want. And I sat there for an hour.
Reading rules over.
Wow.
that's evil.
Brutal.
That is brutal.
I think there's a Geneva Convention against that.
Probably there.
It's been written in now, because of that.
Interesting enough, very few kids came back for a second detention.
Yeah. I'll bet.
See, I got a couple of detentions in high school. Mostly I just was. It's even what they wanted us to do. I just did my homework and I had 8 left.
Well, that's the problem. It's too easy. If you're allowed to do homework, it turns into
Yeah.
sort of like a bonus study hall or something. Well, I got my homework done at least.
Pretty much, yeah.
Well, that was the other problem I had in high school. Is I had too many, for various stupid reasons, I was forced to take more study, like one or more study halls every year. I think the worst I had was 3, which was the year I broke my leg, and I couldn't do gym, so they put me in a study hall. But it's like my parents were always perplexed because I'd get home and I wouldn't have any homework left to do. It's like they stuck me in 2 study halls. I did my homework.
I just wouldn't do my homework. I would read through study hall.
Well, that's the thing. First, I would do my homework with one study hall, and I usually spend the other one writing.
So wait, both of you had study hall?
Yeah,
yeah.
in the last school that I was in, I moved around a lot. So
7 through 12, I had at least one study hall every year.
Yeah, I never had study hall.
I'm jealous. I didn't want. I didn't.
I'm jealous because study hall would have been a great time to do all that homework I never did.
Yep, good stuff. All right, so Keith, why don't you, because for the listeners and for Kevin and everybody, give us the basic introduction to your work and your
Sure.
Who
world
are
and
you
all
and
that.
why are you here?
Yes.
Who are you?
This way we can base all of our future questions and
Who is your
conversations.
daddy and what does he do?
Yes.
So as I said before, I'm an author. I write psychological thrillers and some straight level horror and fantasy and science fiction. So I'm kind of a little bit all over the place. One of the things that I'm currently working on is it's a pseudo vampire story. It's not your typical vampire story.
Okay.
So Brian and I have an automatic connection right
Well, this
there.
is where we cross over.
Yeah. And that one is, it's called The Perpetuals, but it's unique, I believe, because it's not really a story about vampires. In fact, that's how I originally got it published. I had this really, what I thought to be cool idea about how vampire stories could be told. And I went looking on a really good site for authors called Duotrope, where authors and publishers can find each other. And I did a keyword search for vampires. And one of the places that kicked up on the search list there was a place called Fiction Vortex, and I took a look at them. And there were a list of like a dozen other places that were currently and actively publishing stories. Except I got to their About Us page, and the very first sentence back then said, "We don't publish vampire stories. Do not send us vampire stories."
I
And
see
I
so
said-
many places like that. Yeah.
And I said to myself, these are my people.
Because
Because the story, I love the vampire lore.
So do I.
I think it's
Yeah.
absolutely, I think the vampires are arguably the most interesting characters and creatures that have ever been created.
Yeah.
But the market has become not just saturated, but oversaturated.
Blooded.
Oh yeah.
oh yeah.
And, don't get me started on Twilight. What a piece of crap. and
Oh.
what
We do
they've
not
done.
speak about Twilight.
Right.
Yeah,
do
we
not
we
speak.
all agree about
But it's like the pinnacle of how bad it can become, really.
Yeah.
But I loved the storyline. I loved the creatures, and I always wanted to write something. But I'm not going to go do that. And somewhere along the way, one day I remember thinking, the original Bram Stoker, the way that you became a vampire was you had to be bitten by a vampire 3 times, usually in 3 successive nights.
Mhm.
And somewhere my brain said, okay, so what if Dracula finds you and bites you, and then the following night Van Helsing finally catches him and kills him? What happens to you? What are you? Are you human? Are you a vampire? Well, there's actually a term for it. It's called Dhampir.
Yeah.
A demi-vampire,
Yeah.
essentially. And I thought, well, that'd be kind of a cool story. What about the people that are stuck halfway between? And that's where the story was born. That's what it's all about.
So in the story of Dracula, you would be most interested in Mina.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's Mina's situation, basically.
Yeah.
She's partly infected.
Yes. So I just took that concept and I brought it to the modern age. In my particular story, the vampire does it purposely. And then he says, you know what, I'm not going to bite you a second time unless you ask for it. So now it's a story about people trying to hold on to their humanity. So when I sent the submission into Fiction Vortex, I said, I know you don't publish vampire stories, but this isn't really a vampire story. It's a human story. And,
Nice workaround.
yeah. And, they ended up publishing it. They gave it a Story of the Year award, and years later it's being expanded into a full-length novel. That's the one that I'm currently working on right now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, and
It's a lot of fun.
the Fiction Vortex thing is very interesting. That's something you've thought. Oh,
Oh,
Careful, Brian.
I'm breaking the equipment all over. But as I was saying, it's something you've mentioned before. It's almost like kind of a modern serialized
yeah.
format, which is
They're-
kind of interesting.
They're really forward thinking. They're trying to change. I mean, ebooks changed how publishing is done, and
Yeah.
nobody really knows how publishing is supposed to be done at this point anymore. Traditional publishing still works, but then it doesn't work the way it used to. So these are one of many small presses that are trying to experiment and learn a new way to publish. And what they've come up with is 2 ideas merged together, and they're both cool ideas. One that Brian was saying, it's a new version of serialization, like from back in the day. But
Yeah.
instead of another chapter published in the magazine, it's their ebooks, and they have their own reading app. And it's sort of like another chapter, but they're designed to be full-length stories that come out roughly every month. The Storyverse that I'm working in is every 5 weeks.
Okay.
So what's really cool about it is, unlike serialized fiction from the olden days, we have the opportunity for instant and immediate feedback. So, for instance, I'm currently writing episode number 8. 7 episodes have already been published, and people who've read it have voiced their opinions and actually answered questions that I can post on the reading app to see, what do you think? Where do you want this to go? And while it's still a new format and they're working out exactly how to make it all work perfectly, in theory, it could be as simple as all right, here's a list of 4 characters. One of them's going to die. You guys get to choose. And then, depending on what the audience chooses, I have to write that. And I'm still in the middle of writing the story. I haven't planned it all out ahead of time. So that's a really exciting idea. The other part is this idea of story. Ooh.
Excuse me. Getting over being sick, folks. So
The Storyverse is multiple authors telling stories that take place in the same universe. So my Perpetuals one here, I've got it. It actually takes place in something called Ash Falls. Ash Falls is a... they're going to stay up? Probably not. Ash Falls is a city in Oregon where, you know, lots of different monsters live. So my story takes place there, and Jeremy Schofield has a police procedural where his character's trying to figure out why all these people are mysteriously dying. And we've got Sherelle Coons, who's writing a story about sort of a, wow, how do you even explain that one? He's sort of like a demon creature. We've got Steve Cotterell, who is writing a guy who his body has been taken by some kind of a other demon, but he is more or less living in what he calls the gray world, so it's like ghosts.
Mhm.
All of these stories are taking place at the same time in that same world, and therefore we're borrowing each other's characters and major events. And there's actually William Amy has one called Holly. We have 2 more coming up for season 2. So it's a great deal of intrigue and fun to borrow each other's events and reference.
I mean, the shared universe idea is becoming so popular right now
Yeah.
in movies.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems like a logical, and it's been tried once or twice from time to time over the years with books. But with the internet, it just seems like such a neat way to explore that possibility of a series of stories by different authors all taking place in the same universe.
I can tell you this,
Yeah.
it's a crap load of work behind the scenes.
Oh, I
you
know
really
that.
need to be organized. But it's also a lot of fun. Because if I'm having a real difficulty with a particular scene, I can just shout out, you know, we have a
Help.
Slack channel. It's like, hey guys, something's not working. Somebody shoot me an idea. And I'll just be bombarded, you know, because it really helps when you have a great group of authors that are working with you. And editors, people that publish all this stuff, they're really on top of all these things. And it's really exciting. It's also chaos because, you know, I got a day job. You know, I'm actually probably the worst of the authors as far as meeting my deadlines. The guys that are probably laugh their butts off right now if they're, you know, checking this out.
Maybe they can call in if they're
Yeah.
Call in and hound you about something.
Yes,
Yes,
they
I
can
deserve it.
mess with you.
I was going to ask how is your relationship with the publisher?
It's a good one. I don't know what specifically you're leaning towards. I'm happy to share.
Yeah, and just well, my other question was going to be, are they still looking for submissions? Because
Oh God, yes.
I know so many other writer friends and who are looking for places to actually get published.
So now is the time to contact Fiction Vortex. And by the way, the reading app is called Fictionite, which you can get on Android or on any Apple product. And they're actively looking for more authors and even new story verses. I don't know the current number, but the last I heard, they have over 100 authors, and I think 6 or 7 active story verses, and another 6 or 7 that are in the works that are kind of come out over the next few
I have a
months.
few ideas I may actually contact them
Yeah.
about.
Yeah, I'm actually I have the one that I'm doing that I'm thinking of submitting to them. My science fiction vampire and werewolf.
Oh, nice. Well, I've had 2 notions lately, one of which is kind of a police procedural type of
Mhm.
situation set in the semi-Christian end times,
Okay.
which could certainly be an interesting story. I mean, I think that might be an interesting story verse. And the other one that would fit in a lot of other places is just a werewolf story based on some of the more obscure werewolf folklore. Because the thing our listeners know, because I like to talk about it, but a lot of other people don't, is there's a subset of werewolf legends that you find in Livonia and a couple other places where the werewolves are the good guys.
I love it already.
Yeah, you could definitely submit
Yeah.
a story to like one of the universes that would probably go with that.
The way
Yeah.
the way they're kind of working right now is, I believe their preferred method is if you bring a story to join an existing story verse. Because to start a whole
Yeah.
new story verse, you need to
It's a
have
lot
a
of
group of
work.
people
You
to go
need
into it. You
people,
need a leader to organize the whole thing. You know, so that's a bigger risk that they might not be willing to
Yeah.
take right away. But they're definitely looking for more authors all the
And
time.
it seems like that could definitely fit in that or another world. It's the lore is there. I mean, it's certainly setting up in different ways of good werewolves, evil werewolves. But it's just a fascinating idea to me because, in particular, in the legends, they're werewolves chosen by God to do this. And it's like, it's a take on the legends. You don't see anybody doing it ever.
It's
Just
like
about.
Jenga with books.
I forgot to bring my little plastic
Yeah.
stands.
Hmm.
So you learn these tricks.
So the other series that you're kind of known for is the Manhunt
Yeah.
ones.
Oh,
Those
see,
are
now
your
I'm using that to prop the other one.
thrillers.
So here's Manhunt.
I just thought
This
Kevin and
is
Misha might be interested in the premise of
psychological
that.
thriller. Here,
Okay.
it's actually, I'm really, really proud of that cover. I got a great artist from
That is a
Canada
nice
to do
cover.
that for me. And then this is the
Yeah.
sequel.
Which I
called
kind of feel like it
Golden Story.
nowadays is it's really easy to find a great cover artist.
Yeah.
You
I
still,
mean,
you still get what you pay for, though.
You still get what you
Yeah.
pay for. I mean, but like, I'm sure DeviantArt alone.
That's where I found it.
Yeah.
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 So the storyline of that one, there's nothing paranormal whatsoever. This is just human beings being horrible to other human beings. The preface is abused women are taking revenge on sexist men, and what they've done is these the women have created this very, very organized society on a deserted island. It used to be a tourist island in the North Pacific Ocean, and you know they. The ones who've been there a very, very long time, for decades, they're running the place. But most of the women who are doing all the hard work, they're relatively young. They're probably in their 20s or potentially even their teens. And they've all been abused and they all are angry and they want to take revenge on men. So what they do is they go to the mainland United States. They do their, quote unquote research. They find the men that they think are, worthy of being on the island, seduce them, which is surprisingly easy to do. Come on to Hawaii, free trip. We're going to have a lot of fun, wink, wink. But when they get there, they are captured, they're tortured, and they're brainwashed. Now, I've done a lot of research on how brainwashing works. It's actually called coercive persuasion. And it's surprising how possible it is. It's difficult to enact because you need a lot of people and it needs to be done a very specific way. But the human brain is very, I don't want to say powerless to fight against it, but it's very easy.
When it's done well, it pretty much is
Yeah.
powerless.
Yeah.
And I've done a fair amount of research in it as well. A slightly different take because I study cults.
Right.
And you can do it the Stockholm-esque way of torture and pain, but it's amazing how easy it is to brainwash somebody, even in subtle positive ways. They'll never realize. One of the reasons you can't fight is you don't realize what's going on until it's way too late.
Very Pavlovian. Though
Yes.
I would like to include that sounds surprisingly like the premise for the Wicker Man. The crappy remake, not the original, which
Yeah,
was
not
actually
the
based in pagan
Yeah,
background.
not the original.
So
but
so
the
tell
true-
us at some point in your book you don't have Nicolas Cage going, not the
Yippee!
bees! Oh.
No. Although,
Not the
there is one
bees.
character that, say, sometimes when you write, you envision an actor in a particular role because it makes it a little bit more realistic.
I do
So
that all the time.
there's one character in here that I do have like a little bit of a Nicolas Cage bent to it, at least in the one scene in particular I thought of him.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we all, model characters on people. I know I've outright not stolen, but certainly been inspired
Mhm.
for some of my characters by just going, seeing a movie or a TV show and just going, damn, I want a character like that. I want somebody like that.
It's kind of interesting to know because I'm sort of on the flip side of it, where if I have a story, I need to think of who would be good in that role.
Hmm.
Like my fantasy project would be to do a Dresden Files TV series. And the only one I have a solid idea on is Sarah Michelle Gellar as Karen Murphy.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
I would agree with that one.
Well, it's a classic.
There's a lot of
thing.
fan site. I could show you the Dresden Files group where they fan cast all the time.
That's a classic thing with just about any fan group.
Yeah.
If this was made into a movie, who should play who?
Yeah. I've been asked that a bunch with some of my books, like who would I cast? I actually managed to do it because I wrote up a TV pilot proposal for Drawing Dead.
Oh,
So I
nice.
actually had to write up a character list, to as a sort of aid as far as like, okay, this is the
Yeah.
character in a nutshell. And for each
For
one, I
the
put a
casting
picture.
director,
Yeah, I put a picture of, okay, this is the kind of actor
Yeah.
that I would.
Now,
that
did
I
you
would
go
pick.
for just actor or character that an actor has played?
I mostly went for actors. I didn't want, because none of my characters are exactly like I wouldn't cast somebody who had already played that character in another movie.
Because then they'll come out in that movie version, whereas this is a unique character.
Yeah. So, but I did pick actors that I thought you could very easily see what kind of vibe I was going for with the character between the description, and then you look at the actor and you go, okay, I could see how that guy would play somebody like this, and you get an idea of like that's who you're looking for.
Well, when you read fiction, and I haven't written a lot of fiction, at least not in a very long time, but when you're writing for what I know too, it is pretty standard to fit, when you're writing fictional characters, somebody you know, some aspect of you, or there's some basis from somebody.
Well, they say write what you know.
Yeah.
You know, and any decent character that I think I've ever written is going to be either modeled directly off of a real-life person or, you know, some kind of a merging of multiple people. Like, oh, I'm going to take the attitude of this one, but throw in the actual intelligence of that one. I'm going to have a far more interesting human.
Right. Well, because that's how you want to try to approximate something truthful, because otherwise you're essentially dealing in stereotypes.
Right.
If you don't base it on something real, you're kind of just regurgitating
It's that much harder to make
stereotypes.
a complete three-dimensional character
Yeah.
out of thin air.
Yeah, you were saying before, Brian, that you've tried to take characters from other, you know,
Yeah.
movies or shows and stuff.
Do you
I've
ever do
told
that?
a number of people this, but so this is the first time I'm saying it publicly. But this is what I'm kind of proud of, but I'm totally admitting to stealing from.
Wow.
So those of you who are, you know, interested in writing or learning how it works, understand that this happens all the time. So in the Perpetuals, it's a pretty heavy storyline, and in preparing for this ahead of time, I knew that I really needed a comic relief character. And writing comedy is so damn hard.
It is.
I mean, I have the utmost respect for people who can write funny things, whether it's straight jokes or stand up or just writing humor books.
It's hard to be funny on the page.
Yes,
It's a
it
lot
really,
easier
really
to be
is.
funny in person, but
Yeah, because in
on the
person, so
page.
much of it is depending on timing and nuance of body language, and as you said, you don't have that.
Especially if you're looking for a specific person's style. Like my sisters have been watching Simpsons with commentary on it, and they goes up to the episode where they had Rodney Dangerfield on there, and they said, "Oh, this should be really easy to write for." And no, it was incredibly hard to write his style of humor. He ended up writing most of his own humor.
I was going to ask, can he do it? Because that would be
probably, it would make sense.
So isn't Rodney fairly famous for his improv?
Yeah.
In particular, so
Yeah,
it's
like I think one of the lines that who am I even talking to? Like that was improv on the spot, and like I'm walking up to this place and I'm doing all these sticks. Who am I talking to?
So I had this need of a comic character and absolutely no idea how to do it. So I did quote unquote research by binge watching lots of really good TV shows, which is excellent.
Yep.
And I noticed, sort of a pattern of what they did. They always have their shtick. They have their stereotype, something that they're good at. And they kind of show up and do that, and then they disappear again. And otherwise, they're just background characters.
Yeah.
So I knew I wanted to do something, very specific like that. And then finally, I look back at because I needed to introduce. This is talking about the episodic nature of the storytelling. Episode 1 was already done and out there, and now I need to expand my character world. And I need somebody funny. So I'm like, all right, let me reread episode 1 and see the characters that are mentioned in the bar. And at one point I mentioned that there were 2 old ladies down at the end of the bar. Okay, can I turn 2 old ladies into something funny?
Yeah.
And then I remembered the Golden Girls.
Yes.
Classic.
So what I have is a crude approximation of Sophia, the
Oh
oldest
God!
woman.
Oh Lord!
But the real winner is my character's name is Pearl Noland, who is absolutely Rose Nyland.
Yep. So you got Sophia and Rose, the
I got
2 of the
Sophia
funniest
and
characters on the
absolutely.
show. Yeah.
And it was amazing because once I realized that I could steal their personalities, everything just fell into place. And the real star in my story is definitely Pearl, or the Rose Nyland character, because she's believable and stupid at the same time. But then maybe she's not as stupid as you think. And like that's the best part of her, I think.
Yeah.
So, and that's totally cheating, I feel, but I also I really enjoy writing her character.
Well, I have a great passion for the trickster characters, archetypes, so that obfuscating its stupidity, they call it, is always a lot of fun to read, or I think to write.
Well, you know that saying. I mean, the saying, they say, good writers borrow, great writers steal.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh, I've become a great writer.
exactly. No, it's absolutely that way. It's like the more, I mean, you feel at first, you start off and you're like, oh God, I can't, I don't want to use anybody else's stuff or do anything similar. And you realize as you go on, the more I take from other people, like it makes my stuff better.
Also, there are no new ideas anyway.
Right. And
There's it's supposed to be 7 or 8 plot lines, and everybody just recycles throughout time.
And it pretty much becomes like you suddenly.
Shakespeare did them all.
Yeah, pretty much. Shakespeare.
Well, Shakespeare was a major thief.
Yeah.
And Shakespeare did it.
All of Shakespeare's storylines were pretty much stolen. It was his awesome characterization and dialogue that carried.
Well, I still have the slightly heretical opinion. Well, I would certainly never call Shakespeare a bad writer. I do find him a little overrated.
He is.
Here, my take on Shakespeare is it comes down to 2 observations. I think he is a very, very good writer, but I think his real genius, and I think the reason we still study him 450 years later, is because his real talent was the ability to observe human nature and put that onto the page.
Yeah.
Because when we read Romeo and Juliet, the reason that it's so interesting is because unrequited love still happens.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Again, he's an excellent writer.
I mean,
people call him the greatest writer of all time. It's like, I'm not sure I'd go that far.
No.
Well, I mean, that's also the same thing with, I think it was Keats, who wrote The Lamb and the Tiger, where everybody's like best poet of his time, especially since I was doing the Enlightenment, but a lot of people are like, why was the point? And it's because regardless of what age you are when you read it, it's linked.
Well, and a lot of people that get held up as great, like I've never held Charles Dickens in the same kind of esteem that a lot of writers.
Embarrassing admission, I've never read anything of Dickens.
Yeah, I had to in school, and I couldn't stand it. Hemingway bores me to tears.
It's a different time period, it's a different style. It's very slow paced. Both of those.
Well, there's some older writers from those time periods that are Edgar Allan Poe, to me at least, is still amazing to read over 100 years after.
Poe had real insight into just how people
Shelley,
tick.
Stoker.
Yes.
And both Shelleys, I would say. I like Percy Shelley's poetry as well as Mary's book.
I'm curious, is that from the perspective of a teacher and a writer, I have a theory that in school there was always one book you absolutely could not stand. And what would have been your book in school that you absolutely could not stand but had to read?
Catch-22.
Ooh.
And I know that's sacrilegious, but I had to read it in college, and it was one of those semesters where I was just bombarded with so many different, things to read and really dive deep into.
Yeah.
And I got to one of the characters. His name is Major. His first name is Major, and he is a major. That is his rank. So, and his middle name is Major. So he is Major. And every damn time he appears on stage, we get his full name, Major. And I just got to one too many of those, and I put the book down. Yeah. And I just no, I'm done. I can't stand it anymore.
It's supposed to be funny and kind of sad, but it just gets tedious.
Yeah, it's one of the, I need to go back and relive it many years later with totally different eyesight.
I think it might be something that's better on the stage than it is written down.
Well, that's the other thing with Shakespeare is what people forget is Shakespeare was really meant to be performed and seen live, not read on the page. Because generally most people's first experience of Shakespeare is you're sitting in a classroom, you're being forced to read these words off the page, and all you're hearing is your other classmates, how for art thou, Rome,
unless you had the class towns that really got into
Part
it.
of my problem with Shakespeare is we read Romeo and Juliet in high school, which was a great play.
Yeah.
And we read it the way most schools read it, where you took turns reading it, everybody read a part.
Yeah.
And then the next year we did Julius Caesar.
Oh, you were lucky. We got Julius Caesar first, and that almost killed
That's tough to start
most people's interest in Shakespeare.
The way that we read Julius Caesar was terrible.
Oh, well, that'll do
because we had this English teacher, and don't get me wrong, the man was smart as mind like steel trap. He was great at presenting, and he knew what he was talking about. And he answered, I've seen comments from people. It's like they made it through college because this guy taught them this is how you properly write a paper, and that's all absolutely true. But the man only ever talked like this.
Oh, monotone.
And it gets worse. Because where normal teachers, when you read Shakespeare, you split up among class, you read it, the kids get into it, you have some fun with it. He felt that Shakespeare should only be read by be performed by properly trained actors.
Mm.
So either one, we had to listen to him read Julius Caesar like this, or every once in a while he'd bring in an old LP recording of professionally, Shakespearean actors from England, which was good, but most of the time it was the monotone.
Yeah.
That put and it was at 8 o'clock in the morning, so everybody's falling asleep.
And to be fair, Julius Caesar is like
Yeah.
very low on the list of Shakespeare's best works. It is not one of his best plays at all.
Well,
It's suitable for sort of all audiences,
Yeah.
which is why that's one like Romeo and Juliet is much more interesting, but the school boards get it deals with teen suicide. We can't have that.
See, my school looked,
they would rather them read that than things like Macbeth or Othello.
Oh, we read
I would
Macbeth
love
as well.
I would
I
love
read all
either of
three
I
of
those.
them.
wish we did that.
Yeah,
I
those are
I
both
read
tough.
all three of those.
When
I
we
was
did
in high
Romeo and
school.
Juliet, I'm sitting there going, why? Why are we doing this? And when
It's supposed to be at least a little more relatable. because of
Apparently,
the
I went to a
age.
super cool high school to do Shakespeare with because
I had to read Hamlet on my
Macbeth
own.
and Othello.
That's my favorite.
Macbeth and Othello were ones that I had to read in high school.
See, those are good. Those are at least
Yeah.
stories that you
They're
can. They have
great.
some meat to them. You can get invested in them. Oh,
Oh, I
Keith,
love it.
tell them about how you do the thing with the dogs.
Oh,
Actually,
jeez.
before
I
they-
told you about the dogs?
Yes, you
Oh,
told
yeah.
me that's how you got the paw fester.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Give
we
it
got to
some-
talk about the paw
Okay, hold on
fester
a
too.
second. Given we've hit the half an hour marker, do you want to
Oh,
give
yes.
the calling number out, and then we'll get to the Professor thing?
Yes.
So, okay, folks, we're up on our first half hour. Remember, from now on, we're only going to be 6:30 to 7:30, not till 8:30. If anybody wants to call in, the number is 609-807-2492, 609-807-2492. Remember, you're listening live to HamiltonRadio.net, Channel 2, and we're speaking with Keith Fritz.
Fritz. K. Edwin Fritz.
Edwin.
Yes.
Dan
Fritz.
Fritz.
So if you want to call in and harass our guest, please do. But
Hit me.
so, Amisha,
Again?
check out the paw fester. You'll like it.
Okay. Again, remember, if you call in, turn, mute your computer or whatever else you're listening to us on first, please. If you don't need a repeat of the crazy caller.
Yes. But see, we get two guests in one. We
Yes,
can
you
also
do.
interview the paw fester,
So the
who is
Professor
becoming quite the internet celebrity.
Oh, he's far more famous than I am.
Yeah.
The
So what's
Professor
the-
is my social media
Okay.
advisor. He
Those
does
are
very
important.
well on Instagram,
Mhm.
and he basically, I wanted to have something to post online other than just me sitting at my computer. I mean,
Yeah.
well, here I am writing again today. Like,
Mhm.
that's great, Kate. That's awesome. Yeah. So I brought in this character of the Paw Fester who basically chastises me into working harder.
Yep.
And he does a great job at it. And I even done a couple of videos where I gave him this really pompous British accent.
Yes, that's the best
You
part.
know, I don't know if I could get his point. How does he go? How does he go? Dear God, boy, here you are at this paranormal encyclopedia, and you haven't spoken a word about ghosts. I'm entirely confused.
This little dog,
Yeah.
speaking like that. It's awesome.
The reason he exists, though, is something Brian brought up. When I taught Shakespeare, specifically The Merchant of Venice, that was the introduction. It's a very odd introduction for 8th graders.
Yeah, you
Taught it
couldn't
for
even
12
do that.
years.
You couldn't even do that play now because of all the anti-Semitism and whatnot in there.
Yeah, that's the best part because
Yeah.
I can show how it's not there.
Oh, there you go.
But
That's
we
a
don't
good
have
take.
time to get into that.
No, but that's a good
But
take.
to go to the statement, the discussion about it's a visual medium. Plays are meant to be seen, not to be read on paper.
Yeah.
In order to help, because these are kids that have never seen Shakespeare before. So one of the things I wanted to do was to give them a visual. And I have all these stuffed dogs in my classroom. They've been donated over the years.
Mhm.
So I took the time to make little name tags for every single one of the dogs. I had a small table, and they were the actors
Nice.
on the stage. And I made kids put the dogs on and off the stage when the characters were there. And it was fun for them, but at the same time, it gave them this visual. You know, like when the time comes to explain what a soliloquy is, this is the only character on stage. And it's so shocking when you're so used to seeing 4, 5, 7 characters at a time, and all of a sudden just one. It really stands out. And then at the end, you know, virtually every Shakespeare play is going to have a whole cast of characters towards the end. And all of a sudden, I mean, I think in the trial scene of The Merchant of Venice, there's something like 15 or 20 characters on stage. The kids couldn't even line them up right. The dogs just piled on top of each other. The
Dog pile!
Yeah.
Dog pile.
Dog pile.
Literal dog pile.
Yeah.
So this was one of the original dogs into that, and he just stuck around when I needed, you know, somebody to be my social media expert. That's what I grabbed.
You got the professor here.
Paul Fester. He's
Yep.
great.
So,
I don't remember what role he played though. He's very good at it. He should be very proud.
he looks like he would play like in Romeo and Juliet, he'd be the apothecary or the priest.
Yeah.
He's
Like I
got
was
that
little-
Priest
nose
is the best character.
I got
Romeo's
little
priest,
headers
yeah.
behind
Priest and
his ear.
Mercutio. Other than that, no.
Yeah, they get some of the best lines.
Well, I always remember the first, before we read it, the way I was first introduced to Macbeth, I was in drama in high school, and we did one year we did a 1-day drama camp type thing at Pennsylvania Ren Fair.
Ooh.
And their professional actors did an abbreviated version of Macbeth, and then got everybody from the school, you know, all the kids from drama up to get involved, and that was great fun. Just such,
Nice.
it's a medium you've got to see it. You can't
Yeah.
just hear it.
Well,
I learned
Macbeth
to
is a
read it.
fun play.
Oh yes.
Macbeth is fun. So is Hamlet. I actually got introduced to those two through
Hamlet.
through a comic called Dawn Lucifer's Halo through that anthology. And Lucifer actually quotes Hamlet. The guy says, "Oh, that's Macbeth." He says, "No." She says it was Othello. He says, "No, it's Macbeth." And the human's the one who gets it right. And then it was Hamlet.
Nice.
And I actually memorized that line from Hamlet, and I've known it since middle school. I still remember it now. And I really liked those plays to begin with. And then when we were doing actual history on it in school, it's like, yes, this was written right after the assassination attempt on James Stewart. And I'm sitting there going, that's a very distant relative of mine, like very far back, because we were part of the branch that got cut off. So it's like, oh, joy.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see how the politics of the day influenced Shakespeare when he was writing, because that's why certain people are like, that's why Richard III is portrayed as this, you know, scheming, hunchbacked, you know,
Which he wasn't at all.
villain, which no, is not at all historically true, but Shakespeare was kissing up to the people that were currently in power, that were the relatives of the people
See,
that
this
defeated
is
Richard
also-
III. So
It's
it's
something
like,
I sort of respect about Shakespeare, but it's sort of the thing I kind of go, you know, when you look at this, because, you know, one, he does make despite the highbrow nature of a lot of his stuff, he does make a strong effort to appeal to the lowest common denominator,
Oh, yeah.
which is why by the end of all of his tragedies, everybody's dead.
well, yeah, there's lots of sex involved.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
people forget that Shakespeare's highbrow now. Back in the day, Shakespeare was Stephen King.
Yeah.
Shakespeare
Yeah.
was the popular guy
Yeah.
that was the crowd pleaser. You know, he was the Michael Bay of
But on top
playwrights.
of
Like,
And it's like,
you know, like,
some of it just so
This is an analogy I can't wrap my head around.
isn't it? But when you look
I
back,
hear what you're saying.
when you look
Yeah,
back
yeah.
at it, it's like that's true, and that's what you got to explain to people. It's like, no, Shakespeare wasn't a highbrow author at his
No.
time.
No, and if you take a close look at absolutely any of his comedies, and you realize how filthy and bawdy the jokes
Oh, yeah.
are.
Oh, yeah.
He was pretty much the
Wow.
creator of the modern sitcom. I
Yeah.
mean, almost all of his plots are what you now see every week in
Well,
sitcoms.
The famous line,
Arthur-
"Hie thee to a nunnery," is one of his, isn't it?
Yes.
And a nunnery at the time would have been a whorehouse.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was good old
Get
Hamlet.
thee to a
That's
whorehouse.
Hamlet.
Whorehouse.
And he's saying that to the girl who's in love with him.
And then she goes
Not
Yup.
herself.
And then she goes and jumps in the river.
Which by the connotation of nunnery today, that's not what it means.
No.
But which is part of the funny of it is that everybody today thinks of it as a convent. It's like
Also,
no.
acronyms and lead speak. the way it was originally written on the sheets for saying "God be with you," which is the actual line.
Mhm.
It's actually shortened to
Goodbye.
certain letters, which is essentially like our text speak today,
Mhm.
and that's how we got "goodbye," because it's essentially a shortened version
God be
thereof.
with you.
Yep.
Yeah,
At least that's the theory that I've been hearing.
I've
I
heard
haven't heard
Plus
that one.
others.
Sounds close.
Yeah. No, and he invented like a lot of words and phrases that we still
By the
use.
spelling.
That's kind of why he's important. It's not that he's necessarily the greatest writer that ever lived. It's more a measure of
Oh no, he's a very important
his
writer.
influence.
He's
Yeah,
probably the most
importance.
important ever.
Yeah.
That's hard to argue
Yeah,
against.
modern English owes so much to him.
Oh yeah, there's no
I
denying.
think it really helps that Shakespeare is also very quotable.
Yes,
Yeah.
So like, there's a Shakespeare quote for every situation.
just about.
You ever
Well,
seen one of those pages where you take here's a noun and here's an adjective and here's another noun and you put the three of them together and you just invented a Shakespeare insult?
I love
Yeah.
the create your own Shakespearean insult. I want to use some of
Well, one
those.
of the points I've seen made about Shakespeare, and it's a good point. Another writer, one of my favorite writers of the 20th century, Lovecraft, got blasted for this. People do not talk the way that Shakespeare wrote
Right,
dialogue.
including
They didn't write in
He
his
didn't
time
talk
period.
like
Nobody
that.
talked like
No.
that.
it was poetry. It was a performance. It's like, do we speak in song lyrics?
No.
We try to be fun, but no, we do not.
Yeah.
But it's
No,
a
and I
performance.
saw a thing where it was the Royal Shakespeare Company, and they were discussing Shakespeare, and it was people like Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen, and all of these famous act before they were famous. It was like this early, like they were just Shakespearean actors at the time, and I mean Patrick Stewart almost still had hair. It was amazing, you know.
Almost.
But
Wait, he
not
had hair?
quite.
Wait, they still had film back then?
Yes, they did. But and one of the things they were talking about why Shakespeare wrote in the iambic pentameter the way he did, and they said a lot of it is, if you notice, it imposes a rhythm on the actor, and it lets them kind of know when to take a breath,
Yeah.
when to pause. They said that by just reciting it the natural way to recite it, it naturally
But even
It
beyond-
also became
that's because
information
Shakespeare was
for
like-
the audience.
Yeah.
because they knew what to expect.
he was actually an actor, so he knew
Oh, yeah.
this.
Beyond the poetic style, like the language he uses and things like that, people didn't speak like that in his day.
Oh no, it's very, very heightened.
But even like the nobility and nobody talks. It's kind
Yeah,
of the
even the
thing.
nobility
Yes,
would
there,
not.
there's allowances to be made for the fact that he's writing poetry, not the way people speak. But it's even taking the way people, even the nobility of his day spoke and turning it into poetry, it's still not how anybody would have spoken.
But going back to a second about how politics and everything affect fiction, and the fun fact is, the musical Chicago. At first, it was a straight play about the Son of Rise and female murders. So the music wasn't added until I believe the Nixon trials, and the court dancing, tap dancing court scene wasn't added in until the O.J. Simpson trial.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Nice.
Which brings us full circle back to your own work, which
Yes.
is why you're here. Not that I object to going off in tangents, but you're gonna have an author in here, which you give him a chance to talk about his own work. It's like with the shared worlds, and you can incorporate a little bit more of that growing reality, the real world in it, because it's a living piece instead of you write a novel it's done.
Well, that's the other thing. When you write, being an author is typically a very, very solitary experience.
Mhm.
I've heard the joke before that being a writer is one of the only jobs in the world, or passions, or
Yeah.
that in the world where you do most of the work in a room by yourself, and then you expose it to as many people as you possibly can.
Mhm.
It's so counterintuitive.
Mhm.
But with this particular writing style, it's the exact opposite. We're constantly sharing and discussing with each other, so you're not writing alone anymore.
It's not a vacuum.
Yeah.
Which is very different. So how much, to touch back, how much do you get inspired or influenced, do you think, by like what's going on? Like how much of, say, your Manhunt series, like as things are happening, especially like say this year, with all of the sudden
Sexual
flood of
allegations.
sexual
Yeah.
harassment
Yeah.
where you've suddenly got dozens of beloved celebrities that are now being torn down and are pretty much ruined.
Yeah.
You know, and
It's
a few years ago
definitely
maybe that wouldn't have
influencing.
happened. You know, it
Because
wouldn't
this
have,
is actually an incomplete story as
Right.
well. It's a trilogy, and I've written the first two. I've lost a few fans because I haven't released the third book yet. and I actually kind of respect that. Because I'm angry I don't have this
Yeah.
book out yet. It was 2013, 2014, and
It's that
tick,
2018.
tick, tick. Come on, dude, what's going on?
yeah.
It means they care about your work, and that's what
Yeah.
you want.
And that's why I like it. There's a variety of reasons why I haven't been able to get that yet, but
I'm sure.
the perpetuals suddenly showing up, it was a great opportunity. I wasn't going to miss that. But to directly answer your question, I have had to change where I want to go with the final outcome of the story, simply because the conversation, the conversation at large has become far more vocal all of a sudden.
Mm.
And there are certain things. I mean, I'm still going to be writing fiction. It's still my characters. They're literally on their own little island.
Right.
For the most part, my characters don't even know what's going on in quote unquote the real
Right.
world. But I feel like it would be very remiss of me to not include some kind of a reference to what's going on in the real world.
Hmm.
So how to balance that, how to bring in something valuable and useful without ruining, the cadence of my own story is going to be a challenge, but I'm looking forward to it. I have a couple ideas already, and I've done enough research. I have a lot of cool quotes. So like, okay, I'm going to take this, I'm going to take that.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll see what ends up being the final product.
It's actually kind of interesting with the celebrities being torn down due to sexual harassment complaints. Even minor celebrities, like the guy who does Honest Trailers, he just got suspended because some allegations came out of sexual harassment.
Well, the biggest one I just saw in the last day or two, Stan Lee.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I just saw that yesterday.
Yeah.
It's a lot to take in.
Yeah, it's hard because like you don't know these people, but you, after over years and years of watching like their work, especially if you're a real fan of them, it suddenly it kind of hurts to
It
feel like,
becomes personal.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, you realize like, wow, that's really a shame. Like,
Especially,
it's
I mean,
not the
Stan is
person-
such a culture icon.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, Stan Lee is awesome, and
Yeah.
he's done so much cool stuff. Kevin Spacey
Mhm.
was an actor I really liked and respected. I mean, I still respect his work, but it's really hard to kind of know that, like, wow, yeah, I guess he was kind of a scuzzy guy, in some respects, all this time, and it's, if it feels you feel almost a little betrayed.
I think it's important that the conversation is happening.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I mean, this
Absolutely.
this book, this is it's not just for entertainment. I'm making a social commentary, which is one of the reasons I'm taking my time. This is my baby. These are self-published. I do them in my way, on my own time, and I want to have the conversation. And all of a sudden, the conversation is happening all around me, which is like before, when I started writing this, it was 1995,
Yeah.
and it wasn't.
Nobody talked
Yeah.
about
Right.
it back then.
So now it's become so I don't want to say popular, but it's become so commonplace. It's every single day,
The stigma's gone.
Yeah.
People can feel safe to talk about
and that's a fantastic step in the right direction. I don't know how to solve the problem, of course, but I do know that in order to solve any problem, you got to talk about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, at least now it's
Step one
acknowledged.
is getting it out of the closet.
Admit that there's a problem. Step 2, start talking.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. So, do you have anything else coming up that we always give time at the end, usually for plugs? And I don't know if we're
Gene said we can run a little over, so we do have a bit of time.
we
That
can
was a
still,
good time
but
for
yeah,
plugs, say
go
anything
ahead,
got
let
coming
you.
up.
Well, I already talked about the 2 that are big. The Perpetuals is still ongoing. I'm
Mhm.
actively writing episode 8, and the season's going to be ending very soon. And then I'm jumping right into the final book in the Manhunt series. Meanwhile, the Ash Falls Storyverse is continuing. We've already had, like I mentioned, William Amy before, who's writing Holly. That's his story.
Mhm.
He's sort of season 1.5 because he came in halfway through.
Gotcha.
Meanwhile, we have 2 authors who've already written several episodes ready to officially start quote unquote season 2, which I think is going to be March. So these things are going to be constantly going in. Within a few months after that, the official season 2 is going to start with all of the authors from season 1 coming back for their second
Mhm.
season. So there's a lot going on there, and there's so many other story verses and genres. It's not just in paranormals, urban fantasy.
Yeah.
They have science fiction. They have straight fantasy. They actually have an awful lot of stories in the young adult genre. I would say Fiction Vortex is, I wouldn't say pushing, but they're trying to get the reading app Fictionite. They're trying to get that into schools as much as possible. So they want as many,
That makes sense. I mean, the
kid-friendly.
kids love the
Yeah.
phone
Yeah,
and
and
everything
the
to do
children
with
are the future of readers.
Yes.
Yeah.
So and that makes
And
a
you
lot
gotta
of
hook them
sense.
while they're young.
it. Yes.
Yeah, you hook them while they're young. Apparently, that's why quote unquote millennials are keeping a dying library industry alive. If it free books,
Mhm.
Yes.
free books.
And it's as much as I can't stand Stephanie Meyers, the thing that she's doing, I can approve. That her books are doing, I approve of. That I approved of much more when J.K. Rowling was
I
doing
was
it.
just gonna
Yes.
At least it's getting kids reading something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's the bottom of the barrel.
But you got to
But
start
if you get
somewhere.
interested in
Sure.
vampires, and you can move up and read Anne Rice, who, as much as I dislike her, I'll admit is better.
Yeah, she's
And then
certainly better
You can
storyteller.
move up
and a
to
better
the
writer.
greats like Bram Stoker himself.
Yeah.
Brian McKinley.
Right.
Heard of that guy? Yeah.
I got one of his autograph books. I'm very
Nice.
I got a couple.
wanna-
in fact.
I want to meet him.
Not for nothing, but I really can't credit Stephanie Meyer with anything like that. Only because, not for nothing, it's not even actual reading. It's literally reading barely 6th grade level
I
essays
don't
over and over
disagree,
again.
but it's still reading something.
It's
Yeah.
still kids reading books.
It's not kids.
Well, no, there were kids.
There's a lot of kids
There-
reading
there-
it as well.
there
There were
was-
far too many
No, I
adults. I
I
agree,
hear what you're saying.
but
There's a
Yeah.
large portion of the readers that are middle-aged women.
yeah, that's the
Middle-aged,
sad part.
elderly.
Are you going to be appearing anywhere? Any
Yeah, the
conferences or panels or
conventions.
anything?
I'm actually going to be moderating a "So You Want to Be a Writer" panel.
Yeah.
Yes, I
That'll
didn't get
be-
in on that.
Oh,
I
you
wasn't.
show up, Yeah,
I wasn't picked for that one.
that's going to be at the Raritan Valley Community
Yes.
College in I don't remember the exact date, but it's late February.
Mhm.
So that Brian and I have been to many of the same conferences and panels like this, and the way that one is basically going to be designed is you hear the title, "So You Want to Be a Writer," so it's going to be designed towards people who are curious about it or are generally new to writing, and everybody who's on the panel has done enough of it that they have experience
Yeah.
to share with people who are curious about it, and those are always fun because it's like everything you say is amazing.
It
You
really,
published a story. How does that work?
it really is a nice
I've been to
ego
those
boost.
kinds of
Yeah, it is.
panels
I will
before.
say going to those panels is like my favorite thing when I'm feeling horrible about myself as a writer, and I'm just like, wow, I'm such a failure, and I've
And they think
never
of the
done anything.
coolest thing
Then I
ever.
get to go to one of those things, and I've got people like asking me questions, like, "Oh my God, how do you do this? And how do you solve that?" I'm like, wow, I get to like feel. Makes me feel so good.
There's something very, very powerful. And since we're on this topic, I'll give some free advice to anybody who is just starting out writing. The number one rule of being a writer is read a lot and write a lot, and there's absolutely no way around that. If you skimp on either of those two, you're not going to do it. The second thing I would say is write short stories, because there's something very powerful about getting to the end of a story and saying it's finished, and now I can share it with somebody. If you try to, because I fell victim by this. And the first real story I ever wrote was 220,000 word novel that took me 6 years. And by the time I finished it, I went back to the beginning, and the first 100 pages, I basically threw all of them in the trash because that was 6 years ago. I was just learning some things. So learn the craft by doing as many short works as you can, because every time you finish a story, you learn more about character development, you learn more about the plot line and arches and all sorts of tricks of the trade. And if you do one big work, you can learn all of those things once. But if you do a dozen short stories, even if every one of them is horrible, you will learn from every one of them. It'll be a lot faster.
You learn from more. We learn more from our mistakes.
Absolutely.
And it's the thing I'm running into. I'm working currently on a nonfiction book, how to hunt ghosts, basically.
Nice.
I even have a title. It's called "When the Ectoplasm Hits the Fan." How to investigate a violent haunting.
When the ectoplasm hits the fan. I like that. I can see the cover now.
And
Yeah, you could definitely get somebody
What-
to do that one.
what I've been running into is a lot of the chapters I'm working on are articles I've written over the years. It's like I've already written this 6 or 7 times. It's not so hard to write it again.
Which
Just
is a good
informed by
thing.
what I've learned over the last 10, 20 years of doing this.
Yeah, it's just putting it
The
together.
tricky part is I've got to sit down. I mean, I'm working a regular full-time job. I'm doing this, which is now really another full-time job. And it's like the time to sit down and write a book. Especially because the first thing, and it's often what you do with nonfiction as opposed to fiction, is you shop the book around and then you write it.
Yeah.
And I haven't had much luck getting interest. It's like, okay, I'm just going to self-publish this thing, which means I'm going to write it before I can do anything else with it. Time.
The time factor, believe me, I feel you, my
Yeah.
friend. The amount of time that I spend grading papers
Oh, I can
and
imagine.
planning lessons, I don't even get to read as much anymore. Thank God for audiobooks because that at least, yeah, they're
Yeah.
fantastic.
He wound up listening to Drawing Dead on
Nice.
audio
Yeah,
rather than
I had to.
reading it.
I sit in, for my job. I'm a security guard. For my job, I sit in a car 8 hours a day.
Oh, fantastic.
Audio,
Yeah.
the fact that you
Audiobooks are
find
great.
tons of audiobooks on YouTube
Mhm.
is a godsend.
Yes, yes.
And we mentioned this, or I mentioned this before. Have you found that listening to a work changes your experience
Absolutely.
rather
No
than
question.
reading
It
it?
doesn't make it worse. It makes it, or better, it makes it different. Because
Like-
it's a different medium.
You become so aware of like when I listen to my own book on audio
Oh,
to
God,
double
yeah.
check, like you become so aware of like how your sentences have a certain rhythm
Because
or
you're
if they
talking about
don't.
an actor. The narrator is
Yeah.
a professional
Yeah.
actor. And, when I had mine done, because I have a couple audiobooks as well,
Right,
you go back over, you're listening to make sure, and, anything that needs to be tweaked, you said this wrong.
sure.
Some of the times, the problem is not that they did anything wrong, it's that it just didn't feel right.
Yeah,
You know what? I would you mind re-recording this entire, page and a half, just like with a little bit more anger? Like, and these narrators are fantastic because they'll be like, yeah, sure, Keith, no problem. They come right back and they have it for you the following day.
yeah,
But you don't even realize it that, when you're writing it, depending on which words you pause at, which words you emphasize. I like to use italics a lot to put a little bit of emphasis. I think, I feel that helps me out a lot. But it can still be read in a variety of different ways.
yeah, and it
And
changes it.
It
The
does change it.
experience a
It does
lot.
change it, yeah.
Okay, we're coming up near the end. We got a little bit of time left, so I want to throw out the number one last time and probably plug our Patreon as well.
Yes.
So if you want to call in, if you got a last minute question, we're running out of time. We're only till a little after 7:39. 609-807-2492, 609-807-2492. If you like the show, if you like what we're doing, give a thought to visiting us over on Patreon and kicking us some money.
We have
that's-
these lovely T-shirts now.
I gotta get one.
that we can give you.
Patreon.com/Demonology. That's patreon.com/Demonology. The t-shirts are not up on Patreon yet. They will be.
Yeah.
Um,
Along with mugs and posters.
Very cool.
so
I
yeah,
put
so
I put this on all kinds of stuff, and you can get it in a variety of colors.
and the price isn't big. So the t-shirts are what, $13?
Yeah, I mean, I put the price as low as I could get it, like as
Yeah.
low as they will let you sell them for, because I figured it's not about making a huge profit off it. It's about like just having the stuff
It's free advertising.
there.
is what
Yeah,
it is.
it's about having the stuff.
What's the? Do you know what? Do we have a link for them to buy the shirts? And
Yeah,
stuff?
it's teachip.com/paranormal encyclopedia. Is the campaign you'll find, and it's got a bunch of the stuff listed. I'll also post it to
You can also look
to
us
our
up.
links.
Remember, find us on Facebook, Paranormal Encyclopedia, or Delaware Valley Demonology Research. If you want to reach out to us, if you have questions, comments, concerns, if you think your house is haunted and you need a hand with that, please get in touch.
If you know a guy who needs a visit to Keith's island of like Amazon women,
Don't send them to me. I don't want to see those guys.
you don't want to just send the information so you can pass it along.
I will turn them into a character, and then you
Exactly,
can take the events
yeah.
that way. I
I
actually
was about to
did
say, if
do
the
that
island's
once.
real, I think you'd have to
One of the
do it by carrier
characters.
pigeon.
It is a traditional way of getting revenge is to write them into the story. And do
Yes.
horrible things.
Oh yes.
Yes.
Writers are dangerous people to
Careful
make
what you
enemies
say.
of.
You'll end up in my book.
Yep.
Yeah, warning, writer at work. If you interrupt me, you may be edited to a novel and killed off in an amusing way.
Yep. Well, that's the other fun thing is, the writer it's really the other Facebook meme I like to say is like, dear NSA, I am not a serial killer or terrorist. I'm just a writer. Please ignore my search engine history.
I'll say as well, funny enough, there's a sequence in one of my favorite comic books, which is Knights of the Dinner Table,
Oh,
about gaming, where NORAD, or some secret
it's another good one.
military intelligence type of thing, is getting all these hits about people searching for how to build a bomb, layouts of government facilities, all coming from the Muskogee, the fictional town in Indiana where the thing takes place.
Mhm.
And the guy goes to the general, "Sir, we've got a ton of hits in the last hour from this town. What do you want us to do with that?" "Wait, Muskogee? Never mind. That's Gamer Town. We've been down this road before. It's not."
And going back to bringing real life people and killing them off.
Yes.
I had a very unique opportunity when I was originally drafting Manhunt. I had it's a wealth of characters towards the end of this story, and most of them are not critical. They're just names. They're faces to fill the background.
Oh.
But some of them were just a little bit of a name, just a personality.
Yeah.
So I threw in a couple names, and I realized I can have fun with this. So I picked 3 of my best friends from college. Just a first name. Their personalities don't match.
Yeah.
It's just a name. And then I called each one of them up, and I didn't even explain myself. I may have just been a text message, and I said, "Do you want to live or die?" And the greatest part is all 3 of them came right back with an answer. They didn't question what I was doing, and 2 of them were like, "Kill me," and one of them is, "I want to live." So that's what I wrote.
Brian's going to wind up writing me into a short
I'm putting him in.
All right.
Avery's going to consult with him on a case.
Nice.
Yeah, Avery's going to deal with a ghost in the mansion. Yeah.
Of course,
He
yeah,
gets stuff like
absolutely.
The mansion is going to be haunted, and he's going to call in
Oh, beautiful.
Kevin as a paranormal expert to
And
help him
somebody,
out.
when we were talking about this, suggested, and you should have him get killed on air. I'm like, yeah, go for it.
Yeah. You guys
I
have
totally
to watch
do.
a couple episodes of the show.
But I told him, but then the problem is, then it has to really happen because the whole concept, the conceit of the series, is that this all really happened in the background. Obama got elected. Trump is going to get elected.
Mhm.
My books happen in our world.
Real time, yeah.
So, so it's like if I bring Kevin in, it's like I have to deal with. I was asking him questions about, okay, so around 2009, what were you doing? Who were you with? Who was, just so I can get the stuff right.
So you just got to have him win the lottery in the book then.
Oh yeah,
Have him get bugged. This way, there's plausible deniability.
yeah. He wins the lottery, and then somebody steals the ticket out of his hand.
Of course.
Toodaloo!
I won! Gotcha, sucker!
A ghost flies by and grabs it. It's like,
Can't
That
take it
is
with you,
totally
my
my
butt.
If I won the lottery, some demon I pissed off with you is totally going to steal my ticket.
find a way. But so you're talking about co-opting. You'll appreciate this. Stealing characters and
Mhm.
whatnot. Guess where Phelan.
I have no clue.
So believe it or not, Phelan O'Connor started out as Dennis Leary,
Oh,
The
kid,
comedian.
No way.
Yeah. Judgment Night, the movie.
Oh, okay.
The
I
movie
haven't seen that one yet, but I know of it.
You should rent it. It's pretty much only worthwhile because of Dennis Leary
That sounds
as
about
the
right.
villain.
Yeah.
He's playing this drug dealer, and these 4 suburban schmoes get lost and take a wrong turn on the way to a football game or something, and they accidentally witness him killing this guy, and so he's hunting them down as witnesses. Him and his little gang of
Yeah, I
flunkies.
see where you got that from. Yeah.
But just the way he played the character, they really incorporated a lot of his stand-up personality into this vicious drug dealer. So it's Dennis Leary shooting people and kicking in doors and just being evil, but he's still making all of these one-liners and
yeah.
quips and stuff, and just going on rants about stuff, and it's really entertaining. And I was just like, that's an awesome character.
Yeah.
And yeah, he slowly evolved into this Prohibition era gangster. But
Well, I really think that's how writers get their ideas. I said this before. You write what you know.
Yeah.
yeah,
And you did not write the Dennis Leary character.
No.
What you did is you used something that caught your attention.
the
you thought would be really
inspiration.
cool,
It's a
and it became-
springboard,
yeah,
yeah.
it's a springboard.
He's become a much different character now, but you know,
Of
like
course.
there's still that little, like when I try to think of how Phelan should sound, I still kind of in my head I'm hearing the
Yeah.
voice of Dennis Leary.
Yeah, I
Like,
do that with Pearl
you
in,
know.
in the Perpetuals.
Exactly,
She's
yeah.
not,
She's
Rose
not
She's a
Betty
Nyland
real
White.
anymore.
character, but
Yeah.
there is
Yeah,
an
she's
inspiration.
done her own thing, but when I need to bring her in, I'm like, I always think about,
Yeah.
Betty White doing Betty White.
Yeah.
Do these words sound right coming out of
Yeah.
her mouth? And then that's how you know you've got the voice right.
Yeah, exactly.
I do that a lot with characters' voices
Mm-hmm.
are very particular.
I'm thinking we're just about coming up on the end of things for the night.
Yep. You've been a great guest.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
It's K. Edwin
Fritz.
Fritz.
Yeah. FritzFiction.com.
Yes.
Check him out. I'm looking forward to getting a hold of some of his stuff myself.
Cool.
But that's it for tonight, folks. I'm, as always, your host, Kevin Mears, demonologist.
Brian McKinley, vampire author,
Misha Campbell, sidekick.
psychic.
And here we are saying good night and God bless. Smile.